So Twitter has begun banning people that have been wishing death upon the President of these United States. This has been established rule for a while now, and you do see similar things on Facebook. When somebody's basically engaging on the internet, I believe Microsoft termed it inauthentic behavior. Basically, people act as basically not as they would IRL. That stands for in real life, for those of you not of a particular generation or generations. Apologies for my ageism there. But as far as this goes, you'll see it. And you'll have those quotes on, oh, I hope you get whatever. And then you perish. And you just see this all the time. People will say that. It's like, well, I didn't make a threat. I just wanted you or something. It's like, okay, well, all I know is in our current day and age, we're arguing over a whole heck of a lot of things. There are plenty of things to argue about because there are plenty of important things to many people. This is how we figure it out, because as long as we're at least having words, we tend not to be killing each other. Unfortunately, we already seem to be killing each other. See my later video on that. But as far as this goes, it has been a thing for a while now. So we'll pop up a little article here. We'll show this is brought to us by Engadget, which you should be able to find in the doobly-doo below. As we can see, now Twitter won't tolerate tweets hoping that somebody dies. Yeah, the Twitter policy surrounding tweets wishing for death are suddenly in the spotlight. This is one of those things as well. Why is it in the spotlight? Well, the president recently confirmed that he had contracted the coronavirus. Apparently, he went from basically just testing positive to having mild symptoms. And according to Jim Acosta from CNN, apparently he is having some trouble breathing, which if you're producing a whole lot of phlegm and this and that, yeah, it's going to block your airways. It's going to be more difficult. And if I go back to my time, early February, where I may or may not have had it because we really weren't looking for it, we didn't have any of the tests or anything at the time, I felt like hell. I had trouble breathing. I had trouble sleeping for several nights. It freaking sucked. And as a dude that usually doesn't really get all that sick, I had considered even going to the hospital if it persisted. Luckily for me, it did not. Now, I'm a 36-year-old dude. The president is 74 years young. While he seems to have a lot of energy and seems to only really sleep like maybe 4 hours or so a night, you ain't a spring chicken, Mr. President. And this is the thing where you actually have a potential where the President of the United States may potentially lose his life to this. And people are wishing ill. And this is bringing the spotlight. Because a lot of times folks will say, well, I've seen people say that and everything. Okay, it was a conversation between one or two people. Because the way a lot of these platforms works, it's based upon reporting. Folks will see things that seem absolutely horrific about this or that. And it's like, okay, well, did anybody let the platform know? Well, we don't know. Well, I assume somebody. Do you? Do you actually have the answer? Do you actually know this to be exactly true? Because I don't. And this is why I think transparency helps be some of the best disinfectant. Or sunlight. Sorry, words, interchange, play. Language is a funny thing. But as far as this goes here, all right, if you start having the president at real Donald Trump with like 60 or 80 million followers or something, and you got a lot of folks in scale, yeah, if people are wishing bad things, before back in the day, folks were like, oh, look, all these platforms are biased, all these platforms are biased. And I kept saying, I'm like, okay, are they, or is it just based upon reporting? Because when I go around throughout a lot of liberal channels and chats, they'll be like, oh, no, if I think this even may break the terms of service, I'm going to report it. And basically, they were having a, quote unquote, an online war. Okay, I go around to conservative circles, and it's like, well, when was the last time you reported a count or something like that? People are like, oh, I didn't, because it seemed to be a principle. Well, you don't report other people because of my freedom of speech and everything like that. It's like, okay, I can respect that, but at the same time, isn't that why the whole like mundane Matt Jarbo? Apparently, he was a boulder hunter and stuff, and yeah, that was one of the things where basically he got hit for utilizing some material from somebody else. Oh, that was a terrible thing. At that point, he was the victim. And then, now it's like, a la whatever, the kill stream or whatever it was, he apparently didn't know that your history is logged. And when they brought up his history, you saw all these other folks that were reported because they didn't seem to like him. I see you there, Wookie. How we doing, my man? But again, you look at what's actually happening here, and let's continue to go through the article. I'm thinking we're actually seeing a lot of folks reporting that maybe have a conservative or even not so conservative nature because you're wishing death upon another human being. You may not like the president. You may not agree with the president. He's still the president of these United States, at least for the time being. If you do not want that to be the case, exercise your civic responsibility. Vote. I don't care who you vote for, but if you have that right, in some ways it's a responsibility. You don't have to. I think if more folks actually engage in the process, a lot of these problems would kind of solve themselves. But that's just my opinion here. So as we can see here, this was yesterday. I think it was around 1:15 in the morning. At Real Donald Trump. Tonight, Flotus and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together. And as we scroll down, yep, he let us know. I mentioned the motherboard. But basically, Twitter told Motherboard that the rule has been in place since April. But a look at the Internet Archive shows the specific policy appears to have arrived as part of the simplified rules Twitter rolled out in the spring of 2019. Since June 2019, the rules have remained the same. Wishing or hoping serious harm on a person or group of people. We do not tolerate content that wishes, hopes, or expresses a desire for death, serious bodily harm, or fatal disease against an individual or group of people. This includes, but is not limited to, hoping that someone dies as a result of a serious disease. Example, I hope you get cancer and die, within quote unquotes there, my apologies. Wishing for someone to fall victim of a serious accident. Example, quote, I wish you would get run over by a car next time you run your mouth, end quote. Saying a group of individuals deserve serious physical injury. Example, if this group of protesters don't shut up, they deserve to be shot, quote unquote. Yeah, that stuff has been on the books for a while, and this is why I asked. I'm like, okay, and sometimes I have heard from folks that they report things and it does not appear because Twitter also has said that they follow patterns of behavior as well. Whereas if you have a one-off and you just kind of say something stupid, maybe they'll just make you delete it or whatnot. Now, when Twitter happens to ban people, how does it work? Maybe you get a 12-hour ban. Maybe you get a 24-hour ban. Maybe you get a 1-month ban. Some accounts are permanently deleted. I've been a big proponent of digital due process. What the heck does that mean? Especially if you're going to terminate a person's existence on a platform, which the internet, more or less, in my opinion, at least metaphorically, is digital real estate. If you're going to deprive somebody of their digital real estate, or very often their digital identity, before you apply a digital death penalty, there should be an established due process, not just, well, this happened, we're looking at it, okay, you no longer exist, you have no appeals or anything like that. That don't seem fair, especially since this is the actual modern means of production. That's why I think we should be careful of banning people. But we also need to have very well established, clear rules. These seem to be decently clear. A lot of folks don't know about them because, well, if they go around reporting some folks, and this is where bias comes in as well, and it's very important that if we're going to have a rule, if we're going to have a principle, it needs to be equally enforced. I realize I seem kind of tense right now. Yes, I am being very terse. In a tweet attempting to clarify the rules, Twitter's communication department explained that breaking these rules may not result in a suspended account. If enforcement happens, it means that the tweet needs to be removed, and we've seen in earlier circumstances that could mean the account is locked until this happens. Okay, so you're not necessarily going to lose your account, but you need to delete it. Now, if you delete it, isn't that not kind of admitting that you've done something wrong? Is that how they're doing this? Is this how we just kind of set up this legal framework here? Well, you deleted it. Well, it's like an apology, man. You're admitting you did something wrong. Really? So what you're saying is You shouldn't apologize for something. Do we really need to treat each other like we're going after them in court? Do we, oh, well, I guess we've always had it. It's the court of public opinion. Really? I'm I really would like to see some folks challenge this at some point. Hey, you Chef. Hey, you Dave M. Shout outs to my patrons, Dave M. and Joe Franco. This broadcast is made possible by viewers like you. And this is the thing. I see, hey there, Laszlo. Now, we've seen folks, and you'll often say, oh, well, so and so got suspended for this and that. If you all go back, and I'm not sure if any of you watched the whole Joe Rogan when Tim Pool was on, but Tim Pool at one point, I think he had brought up like Sargon of Akkad. Well, Sargon was banned and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, well, what had happened? It's like, well, he was tweeting interracial gay porn to some neo-Nazis. And that was a story kind of going around the whole skeptic community. It's like, oh, well, I mean, is that it? I mean, was that it? And then all of a sudden, Vidya, the one of the head of, I think, Twitter's safety divisions or whatever they identify it as, brought up some of the actual things from what had happened. And you listen to some of those things, and even Tim was like, you just see like the expression in his face. It's like, oh, that's some really horrific things. It's like, really? So what you're saying is somebody may leave out some of the more horrific things they did and just bring up the actual thing that led to them being suspended? Well, if we're going after a pattern of activity, and even Tim was like, he's like, yeah, Stargun started texting me and being like, oh man, yeah, well, this is the thing. If we don't have knowledge about other things, and I'll hear terrible things said about a person, and no matter where it is, yeah, that was basically it for there. Okay, but yeah, oh my God, I'm blocking myself there. Okay, I'm failing at sharing or not sharing. But when I look at these situations, I'm like, okay, well, mean things are being said about this person. I'll give you an example. Aquila, obviously, she recently lost a lawsuit to Sargon in U.S. court because she basically went after him, and the amount that she went after him for, it's like $160,000. I'm like, okay, at even 10 CPM, basically, you make $10 per 1,000 views. That's how a lot of the stuff works on the YouTubes and stuff. It's like, okay, what even if you get 1,000,000 views, I'm like, all right, well, you divide that by 1,000, so that's 1,000 at 10. Okay, well, maybe you made 10 grand off that video, assuming. Why are you suing for 160,000? It seems kind of malicious. But even Akila, obviously, I heard all these things. I went to her channel. I go through and I'm like, all right, well, what would be the most offensive thing that I could think, according to some of the folks with the great skeptical? Oh, an intersectionality video on pizza. I watched that video. I'm like, all right. I see a young woman who appears to be in her bedroom talking about intersectionality and using pizza as a metaphor. I watched that. I'm like, well, that was a young lady basically speaking what intersectional feminism meant to her, and pizza. I now want pizza. I mean, if I want to look for offense, if I want to take this as a personal slight because something is wrong there, it's like, I mean, I could do that. Or I could just try to, I don't know, just look at it and not assume that somebody's talking about me. I mean, if somebody's directly talking about me, I mean, that's one thing. It's like, all right. When Secretary Clinton went up there, it's like, well, half of Donald Trump supporters, they're these isms and everything. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, I'm not completely supporting the president or anything. I'm considering, well, at the time candidate, I'm considering supporting the man. I'm like, are you talking about me? I mean, like, that's kind of what goes through my head. It's like, I ain't committed one way or the other. And it's like, all right, well, that's why I voted for the dude, or at least in part. It's like, you want to know what earned me President Trump at that time, candidate Trump's vote? It was during, I think it was the last debate, and they asked, could you say something nice about your opponent? And Secretary Clinton went out there, well, he has a lovely family. He's a very nice family and everything. Okay. And then candidate Trump was like, she's a fighter. She's been through a lot, and she is a fighter. And that was a sign of respect. He treated his opponent like a human being. That earned my vote right there. Just acknowledging, just as we're seeing right now, Vice President Biden, he's saying prayers for the president. Whether he's telling the truth or not, the sheer fact is he is at least going through the motion, and I truly think he does not want to see another human being lose their life. Because when it boils down, we're all perfectly imperfect creatures. Aside from a newborn child, show me an individual who's without sin. Maybe they exist. I don't really see many. But that's all I got for you all now. I should have another video a little bit later. Hey, Acacia, welcome, Austinator. I'm going to be signing off right now, so thank you all for watching. Peace out. Be safe. And may God bless.